Now, we were really blessed this morning. I'm sure that everyone who was listening, was here this morning, could take something away from what we heard. And one thing I would desire, that we don't just let messages come and go, but we look at the principles that God has told us in these messages, and we seek to apply them as individuals and as a group as well. We're in a time now where we just can't take the Sabbaths and take messages, okay, then that's just another passing day. No, we have to really say, okay, then how can we institute these principles that we've heard that God has used our messengers to bring to us? So I pray that as time go on, as leaders, health leaders, and as individuals in the church, that will seek to really bring in these principles so that we can go forward as a unit collectively, because the devil does want to divide us. If we're divided, God can't use us as effectively as he would want us to be, as he wants us to be used. So we're going to have another feast this afternoon with Dr. Chidi again, live colors, sort of COVID disease and live colors. So this honestly will be very, very interesting for us to take part in again. So if you know someone, even though this is the last minute, I know it's the 12th hour or 5 minutes to midnight before we start, if you know someone who you think they'll be benefiting from this afternoon's program, please just give them a buzz and give them the link as well. Before we start, we'll just have a bow our heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for a privilege of just being able to take part in a Sabbath day where we're hearing messages that you have sent your messengers to give. We thank you for Dr. Chidi being here today. I know you've used him mightily this morning, and you'll use him once again this afternoon. And we pray as your people that we will humbly walk in your principles so that we can stand strong in the times that we're in. Not only just stand strong, but we'll be a living example of your spirit living in us, a spirit of love. And that's what people need to know. People need to see that there is a God, and there's a God who loves us dearly. So help, dear Lord, that as we hear the message this afternoon, that we'll see you for who you are and continue to be with us the way you have. These things we ask in your precious name at this time. Amen. And as I said, Dr. Chidi, he specializes in this area of lifestyle medicine. So, we are getting it really from an expert and a God-fearing man. So two can't be even better still. So an expert and a God-fearing man, what more can we ask for? So Dr. Chidi, thanks again for being with us this afternoon, and God be with you as you present to us.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wes. Good to see you again. Yes, I'm pretty sure you must have all had a wonderful meal, and I'm not going to be here to criticize anything that you've eaten. What I want to talk about this afternoon is something that's obviously very topical. Nobody can have gone through the last year without knowing about COVID-19. So what has that got to do with general health? So considering, as I said before, that I tend to deal with this thing, this program called Life Colors. Each color represents a different condition, and more importantly, a different way back from that condition, a way to be free from those conditions. Because of that, I think in the last year, I don't think I've been busier in my life. Maybe my first year as a doctor, but really I haven't been as busy as I have in the last year, because these conditions have become so relevant with the background of COVID-19. So why don't I start just by, I don't want to give too much background, but just a little bit of background on what we know about this virus. It's one of the coronaviruses. We have had several of these pandemics, epidemics over the years. We've had SARS, we've had MERS, and now we have COVID-19. The interesting thing about all of these viruses, especially all these coronaviruses, but in fact, just about every virus, they're all derived from animals. I can't think, and maybe some quick-witted person can remind me, but I can't think of any virus that doesn't have its origin in an animal. And certainly the majority of the viruses we pick up are viruses that have come from cattle or animals bred for our consumption. So I guess if we're scratching our heads thinking about, well, I wonder how we can reduce the risk of this happening in the future, perhaps we should be eating less of these animals. I'm just saying, okay? In the early days, we know about the lethality, the kill rate of the coronavirus and compared to other viruses. You look at the top there, seasonal flu kills about 0.1% of the people that it infects. Coronavirus is there in the middle. It was about 3% in the beginning compared to things like tuberculosis, Ebola, which are up in the high 50s, 60s, and even 80s. So that's kind of where it comes in the league table of how dangerous and lethal it is. But here's something quite interesting. And this was taken from the Italian National Institute of Health. This was way back in the beginning of last year. But it showed that for everyone who died from coronavirus, over 99% had an underlying condition. That's quite a stark statement to make. Over 99% of the people who died from coronavirus had an underlying condition. And what do we mean by that? We mean heart disease, diabetes, respiratory disease, blood pressure, cancer. All of those diseases that they've been living with and getting treatment for years, maybe even decades. Suddenly coronavirus comes along and it picks off those very vulnerable people. And that's why I always liken these lifestyle diseases as, being a bear stalking us in the distance. You don't want a bear to be stalking you from the distance. You don't want any animal stalking you, but it's in the distance. It's not really going to kill you because it's so far away. A bit like some of the illnesses we have. I've got diabetes, I've got high blood pressure. It's not going to kill me tomorrow. I can put up with the hospital appointments and the medication, and I can just maintain my life. I don't want it there, but I can live with it, just like the bear in the distance. But what COVID-19 has done is just given that bear a rocket boost of steroids into its backside, and it's telling that bear it can now, rather than being in the distance, it's right on your shoulder. Rather than that illness that may not do any damage to you seriously for the next 10, 20 years, now diabetes, high blood pressure, respiratory diseases, they are now really your killers. And so it's important more than ever to start thinking about what can I do to prevent or reverse these illnesses. If it's possible for me to get rid of diabetes, if it's possible for me to get rid of high blood pressure, maybe COVID-19 has woken me up to think, well, why don't I just go ahead and do it? Now is the time, and it is never too late. So what I'd like to do is just share with you what I'm going to do is for each illness, each of the 9 illnesses, I'm going to share with you one tip that will help you prevent or reverse it. Just one for each one. And I'll say something about that at the end. So why don't we start with the heart? The heart disease actually is one of the biggest causes of death in Western society. If you're going to die prematurely, the chances are you will die from a problem with your heart. What one thing can we do to reduce the risk of that devastating and debilitating disease? The one thing I would first of all recommend to you is, if you haven't done it already, start introducing yourself to a healthy plant-based diet. A healthy plant-based diet. Look, it's important that I emphasize healthy because not all plant-based diets are healthy. There are many cakes and donuts and whatever that are based on plant-based material. That doesn't mean we can just eat that all the time and say, well, I'm healthy. In fact, I have so many people say to me, I can't understand why my cholesterol is so high. I don't eat meat, But what you find out is if they eat quite a lot of sugar, sugar gets converted to cholesterol. And so your cholesterol levels go up, even if you've never come anywhere near meat. So increase the amount of plant material in your diet. If you can't become a vegetarian overnight, that's fine. Just increase the amount of plant material on your plate. I always say to people, why don't you just look at your plate and have at least half of it with vegetables and beans. And the rawer the better. They doesn't have to be raw, but the more you can do it that way, the better. So the one tip to prevent and reverse heart disease is increase the amount of plants in your diet. Try to sustain a healthy plant-based diet. What about blood pressure? That's linked to heart disease. There are certain parts of the world, I go to Nigeria quite a lot, or I used to, and I was doing one clinic, and I think every single guy that came in, whatever the age they were, had high blood pressure. So it's a devastating killer. It can lead to strokes and kidney failure and all sorts of problems. What can we do to prevent it? And what can we do to reverse it? So one thing I'm going to give you is greens. I think almost for any condition, any lifestyle disease, greens has a big part to play, but especially when it comes to high blood pressure. You see, when we digest greens, they dissolve into our blood. And what they do something quite miraculous. They stimulate the interior of our arteries. And they stimulate those arteries to release a chemical called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the active ingredient of that spray people put under their tongues when they're having a heart attack, glycerol trinitrate, GTN. It is also the active ingredient to things like Viagra. Now, I can't see many of your faces because you've all blocked it off, so I don't know who's looking embarrassed or who's looking away. But just in case those of you who don't know, Viagra is used for erectile dysfunction. It allows more blood to go through the system. Now, the reason how it does that is by opening up the vessels. So dark greens are this potent drug that we can use to open up the vessels. If you open up the vessels, you can lower your blood pressure. And for those people out there, I mean, I used to say this to many men, look, if you want to be healthy, eat more greens. And they say, I don't want to eat that rabbit food. I don't want rabbit food, I want real food. And my advice to them is always, look, the one thing we know about rabbits is that they don't need Viagra. I'll move on. So number three, what is the answer to cancer? One answer is to spice up your life. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not talking about the Spice Girls. I'm talking about using spices in your diet to improve your health. You know, if you go back to the medieval days, we used to talk about all these spice routes for getting spices from the Far East through to Europe because spices were so valuable. Some of them were more valuable than gold. But today I can tell you that many of them can do so much for your body. They seem to be worth more than gold. Let's take turmeric right at the top there. Turmeric is one of the most powerful antioxidants. What is an antioxidant? An antioxidant is just something that stops oxidation of your tissues in your body. Why do you need to do that? Well, think about oxidation as a biological equivalent of rusting. Let's just put it that way. You know, you leave iron out and it becomes rusty because it's oxidizing with the air. Well, there are particles in our body that tend to oxidize our DNA, our cells. And when they oxidize those cells, they become denatured, malformed. So if your DNA is being oxidized, it can lead to mutations and illnesses and cancers. So the more antioxidants we have in our system, like turmeric, the lower our risk of getting things like cancer and many other inflammatory diseases. Speaking of inflammation, ginger, which is a close cousin to turmeric, is also an anti-inflammatory. If you really want to bring down the amount of pain in your system. So in fact, turmeric and ginger are potent drugs that can reduce pain. I often recommend to people, if you're getting swollen joints or anything like that, take some turmeric, sometimes do it with black pepper because it reduces the amount of turmeric that gets denatured. So take it with black pepper, and it can be as powerful as taking a Nurofen and natural without any side effects. Lower your blood sugar, cinnamon's a great one. So if you must have apple pie, put some cinnamon in. Now, cardamom is an interesting spice because it does something. It activates what we call natural killer cells. Natural killer cells are our white blood cells that go around the body and they're looking for cancer and they're looking for infections. And when they attach to cardamom, they increase their capability. So you have this fighter system in your body that is now really active and really vigilant and can pick out all the cancers and all the infections that you don't want in your body. So spicing up your life is one way to answer the question of cancer. How are you going to beat diabetes? You know, diabetes in Great Britain, it accounts for about somewhere between 10 and 15% of the NHS budget. It's a debilitating disease and affects so many people more and more each year. So we need to find an answer. And one thing I do recommend for people, because I help people to reverse all of these diseases, one of the key things that people don't realize is that every time you eat a meal, the best thing to do is immediately after, go for a walk. Why do I say that? Well, when you go for a walk, you're using the big muscles of your body. Now, normally, in order for glucose to get into the cell needs to have insulin to bind to it. Insulin will bind to it, and then the cell opens up to glucose. Well, the big muscles, and actually our brain cells, our neurons, do not need insulin to open up to glucose. So if you go for a walk after even a healthy meal, rather than your blood sugar building up, that sugar will go straight into those big muscles, lowering your blood sugar, therefore lowering your insulin levels. And that means your cells become less resistant to insulin because they're not always surrounded by insulin. That's what diabetes is, insulin resistant, well, at least type 2 diabetes. Okay. How do we avoid friendly fire? Okay, in this day and age, friendly fire is becoming more relevant because there's so many countries at war. And friendly fire is, of course, when rather than killing the enemy, somebody in your platoon kills a friend, somebody on the same side. That's a tragedy. I mean, it's a tragedy that any life is lost in war, but it's a terrible tragedy when you've killed one of your friends rather than your foe. And that's what I tend to call autoimmune diseases. Autoimmune diseases are where your body's defense mechanisms, the antibodies, rather than attacking the virus or rather than attacking the bacteria, starts to attack our own cells. And there are hundreds of autoimmune diseases. And wherever you have tissue in the body, you will have antibodies that will attack it. Our antibody system is actually quite remarkable, but it does go wrong sometimes. So the question is, I remember when I was at medical school, we'd have all these weird and wonderful diseases. And you'd ask the professor, well, what's the cause of them? Well, we don't know. How do you treat them? Well, you know, we give them steroids or we cut bits out. But look, if you really want to start to fight that battle of friendly fire, one of the best things you can do is give up on milk, okay? Because milk is one of the proteins in the system that causes your antibodies to be active, well, the auto antibodies, the ones that are attacking us, to be activated. So a bit like Bart Simpson used to say, don't have a cow, man. The New England Journal of Medicine, as you can see here, back in '92, realized that children with type 1 diabetes, and that is an autoimmune problem, 98% plus of them had these high levels of antibodies to milk protein, or they call it bovine protein. And children without type 1 diabetes, hardly any of them, less than 2%, had any antibodies to this protein. And so they came up with a reasonable conclusion. We think milk has something to do with the production of type 1 diabetes. I mean, but you know, we give many of our children cow's milk almost from birth. So that is something that we might want to look at. Okay, and if we do have an autoimmune disease, one of the first things we need to do is to start getting rid of milk protein. Number 6, obesity, the battle of the bulge. And many of us are fighting it. You know, there are lots of people who think, well, you know, I'm not overweight. I'm not fighting the battle of the bulge. Well, actually we are, because many of us who were even quite slim still have lots of what we call visceral fat, that fat around the arteries, fat around the heart and the kidneys. So that visceral fat actually is more dangerous than what we consider the obvious subcutaneous fat. It's the one that can lead to the cancer and the heart disease and the diabetes. So all of us are fighting this in some way. What can we do about it? What's the best thing we can do? Well, get rid of the white stuff. Yes, it is not a racist comment I'm making. I'm saying get rid of that stuff called sugar, a wonderful addictive substance that is so addictive in our brain, it behaves very much like heroin. If you look at the stimulation for somebody taking sugar and the stimulation for somebody taking heroin, it is almost exactly the same. And that's why it's so difficult for many of us to give up on sugar. So what we need to do is start to replace that refined sugar with the natural sugars of fruit and things such as that. I always say to people, we used to be slaves for sugar. Now we seem to be slaves to sugar. Okay, number 7, we must not forget dementia. I'd say that for most people, dementia is the biggest fear from disease. It used to be cancer in the early days when I was a medical student, but now that's been superseded by dementia. In Great Britain, we have about 1 million people with dementia, and it's increasing. Now, although that sounds like bad news, the good news is that dementia is not a random disease. I know people are thinking, well, will I get it? Or my mother had it, my father had it, does that mean I'm going to get it? Dementia is a lifestyle disease. And in fact, people are now beginning to discover if you're overweight, if you have high blood pressure, if you're diabetic, your risks of dementia go up. But probably by far the biggest cohort of people who get dementia are those people who sustain a prolonged area of stress, especially in middle life. You know, those incredibly stressful periods, and if you take on so much, those people they occupy 40% of the people who have dementia. Now the good news is, and the evidence is quite clear, that when you get the initial signs of dementia, much of the symptoms are reversible. And one thing I'm going to share with you today is, for a very good memory, you need to have the berries. They show that these powerful antioxidant fruits are wonderful in protecting the brains from the degeneration caused by Alzheimer's. Now, I was doing this talk in another country, and they didn't have blueberries. And I said, well, look, it's not about blueberries. You can have any kind of berries. Whatever berries are close to you, near to you, local to you, because they're so high in antioxidants, and berries are these wonderful bullets of antioxidation. Take as many as you can each day. I always say, don't go through a day without some sort of berries. You know, if you do that, you can help protect your nervous system. And in fact, it's not just protecting your nervous system, it's protecting your whole body. We talked about this morning. How do you get free from stress and depression? Oh, I need to get... Yeah, how do you get free from it? Well, obviously, we need to get help early. The earlier we can get help, the quicker we can deal with those problems, as we mentioned in the morning. So all of these diseases, they're linked together. They're linked together by the fact that we can acquire them because they are lifestyle diseases. So it's all about what we eat, whether we exercise, how we think, how much stress we have. The more we can do to overcome this, the better it will be. And that's the whole purpose of Life Colours. The purpose of Life Colours is to help people to free themselves from these diseases. Now, here's the interesting thing about all those individual tips I gave you. Each tip can help with every other disease. So the tip I gave you for obesity works for every other disease, and this is the same for everyone. This is quite interesting because it means, and it shows, that health is holistic. It's not like a drug I'm giving you. I can't give you heart medication if you've got cancer. That doesn't work. But the thing that will help you with heart disease naturally will also help you with diabetes and cancer and autoimmunity. That's just how God has designed it, that every good thing you do is good for everything else. So that is what I'm encouraging you to do. and here's somebody who got some help a while ago.
Hi, my name's Sandra Porter. I used to be diabetic. I had an underactive thyroid and high blood pressure. I was also slightly on the heavier side. I'm now free of all medication. My blood pressure, my thyroid function, and my sugar levels are all normal. Thank you, Dr. Chidi, for all that you've done for me.
Well, that's good. I mean, so this lady had 4 of these chronic diseases: thyroid disease, hypertension, diabetes, and overweight. And without doing anything really dramatic, but just understanding what is the nature of her lifestyle and how it has brought this about, we were able to reverse all of them. And that was within about 2 months. So I'm just sharing that with you just to show you that what is possible for us to do. Now, remember, we're talking about COVID-19 as well. All of those diseases make you at risk for COVID-19. And this is the thing that we're not really talking about enough in society. If we can get rid of these underlying diseases, we can save so many people. And that is really the key. You may have heard also about this issue of race and COVID-19. Black and Asian people are much more susceptible to COVID-19. And there are many theories for it, but the truth is out there that it is real. For example, this is what came out from America. You can see the blue, the blue section represents the proportion of the city's population that are black. The red indicates the proportion of deaths by the black population. So Louisiana, 32% in the population are black, 70% of the deaths were black. And you can look now, Chicago, 30%, and 30% of the population, nearly 70% of the deaths. So what on earth was going on? Is it poverty? Is it racism? Is it a conspiracy? The evidence shows many things, and it can be due to poverty. But what I would like to share with you is this interesting thing that, back in early of last year, you go to Nigeria and all the other African countries, they had very low numbers initially. And we were wondering, well, why were they having such low numbers, and even in the Caribbean, such low numbers, but black people in the West were having very high numbers? And we got an inkling of why this was happening because of some of the old research we knew. We knew that, first of all, viruses don't last too long in the sunlight. So when summertime comes, as it has now, numbers go down. We know that. That was evidence that we already had. But here's something that we also figured out. This was done for the British Journal of Medicine many years ago. And it said, if you give people vitamin D, so give people vitamin D, so the blue and the red columns, the amount of people who have influenza symptoms during the flu season go down dramatically. The orange column is just the placebo. That's the people who, the people who didn't get any medication whatsoever. But if you give them vitamin D, even a small dose of 800 units per day, their symptoms went down. We then saw certain other tests that were coming through. So from people who were suffering with COVID-19, you can see there are different levels of severity. There's mild, ordinary, severe, and critical. The green sections indicate the people who had good levels of vitamin D in their blood. And you can see when more people had good levels of vitamin D, very few people got severe or even ordinary levels of COVID-19 symptoms. In fact, the more vitamin D you have in your system, the better your recovery and actually your protection from COVID-19. Now, I believe the NHS and the NICE health guidelines here are starting to indicate that we should be giving supplementation. In fact, we did give supplementation of vitamin D last winter during the COVID crisis to reduce the risk of getting COVID-19 and to reduce the severity of the outcome of COVID-19. So So this is just kind of a whistle-stop tour of some of the things that we can do to get rid of the underlying diseases, and also some of the other things we can do to help prevent us getting this seriously pervasive disease. And it hasn't stopped, and we still have it, and it's still going around the world. But there are many things that we can do for ourselves. So what I will do, I will stop there, as I think we can have some questions from those of you watching. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if anyone wishes to ask Dr. Chidi any questions, especially from this morning or even later this afternoon's presentation, just feel free to do so. Just make yourself known and bring yourself to your mic on your device. That's fine. While I'm here, I've sort of got the privilege of the first question. Obviously, you're an international speaker, and being an international speaker, you would probably more than likely have given the presentation on the milk. And I would understand, or I'm just probably thinking that if you're telling folks that milk could be an issue, especially with autoimmune type 1 disease, diabetic disease for children, what sort of response do you get from our dairy industry?
Yeah, okay, well, that's a good question. In fact, I think I remember one of the first talks I ever gave about milk and the autoimmune system, sadly for me, was in Northern Ireland, and half of the audience were dairy farmers, right? So you're talking about possibly a hostile audience, possibly, but actually they took it very well. But your question about the dairy industry, it's very interesting. I used to do a talk with a lady called Professor Jane Plant, and she was quite famous for reversing her own cancer and helping other people's cancers because of lowering the amount of dairy. I remember being offered quite a lot of money from certain dairy industries to stop doing these talks. My biggest problem was that she was offered much more money than me. I mean, I don't know about why that was, but yeah, I mean, it's not popular. The problem is the dairy industry does know what the problem is. They are aware of it, but what can they do about it? I mean, I have to say I have some sympathy for dairy farmers in this country. I mean, they work incredibly hard. They don't make an awful lot of money from selling to supermarkets anymore, but I can't get away from the fact that the things that are in cow's milk weren't designed for the human body. We were designed for our mother's milk, and when we are weaned off of our mother's milk, that's it. We're the only animals that still drink milk into adulthood and drink it from other animals. There's a reason why we suffer from these diseases. So the quicker we can wean ourselves off of it, the better. And I know, don't tell me, I know there's all but I love my cheese, I love my yogurt, I love my, and I sympathize with you because I haven't found too many non-dairy equivalents for cheese, but the yogurts, there's loads of them. The milks, the plant milks, there's loads of them. So there's no excuse for that.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a tribe in Sudan that their diet is on milk, and they're all giants. You know, so
I think you mean Kenya.
Well, yeah, Kenya. Their main diet is milk, and they are giants. You know,
Hey, so I'll tell you something. It's worse than that. Their diet is milk and blood mixed together.
Oh yeah, and blood, right? Yes.
Yes. So the Maasai, and you look at the Maasai, they're tall. They're taller than me. They look fitter than me. They probably are fitter than me. And they have, I mean, they don't eat it every day, but the concoction, I can't think of a worst one. Blood mixed with milk. I mean, anybody tried that? I don't know. I would never go near it, but that is part of their staple diet. And you're right. They're fit people. They look good and they're tall. So how can I be talking about dairy products when you got this tribe that's doing this practice? Well, look, there's something about diet. You know, when those people go up Mount Everest, they climb Mount Everest, you know how many calories they have per day? They have about 9,000 calories a day. I mean, the average person takes 2,000. When you're climbing Mount Everest, you need about 9,000 calories. Now, if you or I were to take 9,000 calories every day, you know what we would look like. The Maasai, when you look at the Maasai, even though they do this abominable concoction, they hardly ever sit down. They are walking, running every single day, right? So the amount of activity they put in does actually override some of their practices in their diet. So I wouldn't look at the Maasai in Great Britain and copy their practices unless you're going to live like them. But to be honest, even if you're not going to live like them, even if you are going to live like them, there are healthier ways of being. So for example, you talk about the Maasai, I can tell you about the Bantu in Africa. These people in the Bantu in Africa, they have a plant-based diet. Their blood pressures are absolutely like teenagers right until the time they die, and they don't usually die until in the late 90s, over 100. So yeah, you take the Maasai, I'll take the Bantu.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Elder Davis, Douglas Davis.
Yes,
Your hand. Yeah.
Just a question with regards to, you refer to vegetables having at least half your plate of vegetables. Now, some people like to stir fry the vegetables, and I'm just wondering whether when you stir fry vegetables, whether it's blocking the somehow affecting you getting the full goodness of the vegetables. Some people might fry it in, say, coconut oil, thinking coconut oil won't affect the absorption of the vegetables. What advice is there on that?
Okay, thank you for that question. And that's a good one. I think it's the sort of thing people are concerned about, how we process our food or cook our food. For the most part, my headline thing to say is, look, just eat vegetables. I mean, however you want to cook it, fry it, even microwave it. Yes, I did say microwave. By the way, look, if you get peas and greens and spinach and you microwave them, I mean, how much, and this has been measured already, how much nutrients do you think will be taken out of greens if you microwave? I'm not talking about stir fry, microwave. I tell you, it's less than 5%. That's microwaving. I wouldn't worry about it. Eat the veg in exactly the way you want. If you like it stir fry, that's perfectly fine. Use a good oil. Coconut oil is not bad. Olive oil is okay. But I think the biggest and most important thing is to get people used to eating vegetables on a daily basis. Sometimes we can obsess a bit about how it should be cooked and fried and whatever. Don't worry about that. Just eat them, please.
Okay, that's great. Anyone else?
Thank
you.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
I want to know, like when you talk about greens and things, how much should we eat? Is it a daily thing or something we should be looking at building in so many times in a week? How does that work?
That's a good one. There's a colleague of mine, very good guy, and he's got this book out called How Not to Die, Dr. Michael Greger. And I like what he says. I can't really beat it. He says that there is a daily dozen, and I'd suggest you look it up on Google, but there are certain things that we should eat every single day. Dark greens are one of them. Every single day, there should be greens in your diet. Every single day, there should be what we consider cruciferous vegetables in your diet. Those are the broccolis and the sprouts and kale and things like that. Everyday beans, some sort, I don't mean the baked beans, I mean a variety of beans, berries, flax seeds, turmeric, water. All of those things should be part of your diet every single day. Never let a day go by without it. If you really want to sustain your health, those are some of the crucial things that we need to be doing.
So sorry, just to clarify the list you've given us then already, try and build most of that into your daily diet.
Every day, yes. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask?
Thank you, Julie. Oh, sorry, there's someone there as well. And there's also a question on the chat as well. So sorry, someone was asking a question. Then I'll do the chat one after.
think it bless more.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay.
How are you, doctor?
Good to see you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
You're on a plane's wing. You're on a plane's wing. What's going on? Are you okay? Are you okay?
I was going to Africa.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is, I really understand, but let's say you live in a certain place area, like in the poorest countries and the like, the way you have just said, and then somebody's listening, and then the people can't actually have those things on daily basis.
Yeah.
And we see them actually, like for example, before the white invaded Africa, they used to eat food seasonally. Do you understand? Winter, summer, do you understand? So in winter, where I'm coming from, you don't see green substances like vegetables and like, and it's very rare to see cabbages and like. And so how would you explain that, let's say, the way you have just said, and then somebody is listening and say, oh, well, doctor is saying we should do this, but how can I get all these things? Do you see what I mean?
Yes, good point. And that brings me on to something that's very important. I mean, you've even said it, this seasonality of fresh produce. I mean, here in Britain, we can get anything we want any time of the year. That's fine, absolutely. But some people might say, well, is it actually the best thing for us to be getting everything we want every time of the year? Should we not be eating things that are seasonal? So when you're talking about back in South Africa and many parts of the world where people, they don't have Tesco's and Waitrose, they just have what grows around them. Well, we know that that is the best and healthiest way to live. But those people are eating the produce from their own ground, right? That is by far the best thing to be doing. Now, I'm not sure, because you may be able to correct me, I'm not sure, but I think there are green leaves, different ones, that can be eaten at different times of the year. So that's what I would recommend. So you don't have to have the same thing, but you do need to try and have the same category of thing. So you don't have to have the same beans or the same berries, but make sure you have a type of berry, a type of green. If you're doing that, I think you're at your optimal level. I mean, what we know is that, for example, in Africa, before we became so westernized, they were much healthier. They were living longer, right? You know, when McDonald's and everything moved in, that's when the problems started.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, we need to go back to basics and just bringing it a bit more home to Britain. I use the same principle. Like it or whether we believe it or not, we're in a very wealthy country, right? This is an incredibly wealthy country where we can pretty much buy whatever we want to eat. My suggestion is that we try and, what I would say is just lower our expectations in terms of how rich we want to eat. You know, let's try to go back to basics. It's actually cheaper and it's healthier. Okay,
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Just
Dr.
before.
Chidi.
Oh, yep.
Yes.
1 second. Who's asking? Who's that?
Richard.
Richard, 1 second. I've got a couple before yourself. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Now, on the chat, there was a question on lung disease. Obviously, lung disease, you've got many aspects of lung disease, but we know with asthma and other aspects of COPD, blah, blah, blah. Is there a specific food that can help or slow down the effects of the disease instead of medication? That's sort of a chat question.
Okay, that's a big question, because you say instead of medication. I don't know what the nature of the disease is. There's much we can talk about lung diseases. But let's say the big common ones like asthma and COPD and stuff like that. Asthma, for example, it's one of those atopic conditions where the body's immune system is at play. We know that even by reducing the amount of milk in your diet, you can reduce symptoms. Increasing the amount of vitamin D, sometimes, and not always, but sometimes also lowering the amount of wheat in your diet can help. But again, depending on what the disease is, some of these diseases will not respond to pure lifestyle. They need to have proper intervention. And I would say for example, let's say it's lung cancer. Lung cancer, I think in the last 5 years, one of the biggest discoveries I've seen, rather than chemotherapy and radiotherapy, is immunotherapy, using your own immune system, and this is a hospital treatment, using your own immune system to pick out and destroy that cancer. It's got tremendous results, but okay, it says COPD, so it's a derivation, almost like a worse case scenario for asthma. But so what you would need to do is make sure you have all the anti-inflammatories in the system as well. We talked about those spices. If you have something like COPD, any kind of inflammatory disease, you need to have high amounts of spices, high amounts of vitamin D, and low amounts of refined sugar, milk products, and meat products.
Okay, thank you. I hope that's answered the question. The person who posted that one in the chat. Now, Shauna Lay, you'll be next.
Yeah, thank you.
That's okay.
Okay, so I live on a plant-based diet. I have been for years. I also have like a gluten intolerance, but have found, like, on a recent blood test, that my B12 levels were like below the low level, and so I had to have like injections and so forth. But I've been on supplements, so I don't understand why or how it's happened. And they haven't really explained the cause for it, but that I'm supposed to go back every few months, every 3 months, I think, for injections. So I was wondering if there's a way to avoid doing that and get it from my diet.
Okay, and you're on a plant-based diet?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one of the big dilemmas for plant-based diets, because vitamin B12 doesn't exist naturally in plants. Okay, so it's in high concentrations in meat products, but it's very low or insignificant concentrations in plants. And so for people like yourself and me, I'm a plant-based individual myself. I don't eat any animal products, really. We are at risk of having very low B12 levels. And for that, I always suggest, okay, take a B12 supplement, take any kind of B12 supplement. Now, you've been taking a supplement and your levels are still low. So either there's a problem with the supplement, or maybe your doctors are going to investigate further as to why maybe you don't absorb B12. I mean, certain diseases of our bowel can stop us from absorbing B12 properly. So that would be something that needs to be looked into. But I do say generally to people, if you're on a plant-based diet, it is the best, healthiest diet to be on, but you do run the risk of being low in B12, so take a supplement. I know some people think, well, I don't need to take a supplement, but honestly, I mean, you don't have to take much of B12. I mean, you can take it like once a week. It's a very small amount once a week, and that is what is necessary just to keep your blood cells and everything else going well. So I just say either change the supplement or do get investigated, especially in your bowels, to find out if there's sometimes there's areas of the bowel, I think it's around about the ileum and jejunum, which can actually, if it's slightly inflamed, it won't allow you to absorb B12.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Richard, you're next.
Oh, yes, thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Chidi.
Thank you.
I know that you're advocating that we should eat green leafy vegetables.
Okay.
And I must say, I don't eat many green leafy vegetables, although I'm on a plant diet, because when I go to my supermarket, what really puts me off is that some creature has been eating the leaves before I even get them. You know, things like slugs and caterpillars.
Oh yeah.
That really puts me off. Is there any alternative to green leafy vegetables?
That's a good one. Look, let me say this first. It's the foods that the slugs avoid that you should avoid, really, to be honest. If the slugs and the animals are eating it, that probably means it's good for you. Now, some of the food that we have, I mean, you can put it in your cupboard and come back to it 3 years later. It hasn't even started to decay. It is packed with preservatives. It is packed with all sorts of weird and wonderful things that may taste good, but they end up killing us. Yeah, I get the point. I mean, you don't really want to eat things that you can see bugs have eaten before, but you know, that is kind of nature. And I actually think that it's almost like a bellwether sign to say, well, this is okay to eat. You know, I often hear people say to me, well, the soil isn't good enough, so that we don't have enough vegetable vitamins and minerals in our food, so we need to have many, many, many more supplementations. I don't recommend much apart from B12 and vitamin D. And my point is this, a bit like what you're saying, Richard, is that all the animals out there who are not on all these supplementations, they're looking all right. The birds are flying well, the rabbits are doing okay. They're chewing on the same stuff that we're chewing on, and they don't seem to be deficient. So I would say cut around the bite marks of the slugs and the other bugs and eat your greens.
Thank you very much.
I would say this, look, if there's one food that seems to be beneficial to just about everybody, it is greens.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you, Dr. Chidi.
Okay, we've got, thanks, Richard, for the question. Next is Jennifer Satchwell, and then Michael. And then we've got a question from the chat as well, from Jojo. Okay, so Jennifer.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Chidi.
Good evening, Jim.
Thank you for being available to present this presentation to us. My question is, I feel that when one actually cuts out meat and dairy, it tends to lead to weight loss. Mm-hmm. And what if you find yourself in that category and you think the weight loss is too much for you, yes, i.e. you lose strength, you tend to be a little bit more shaky and less tolerant?
Oh, did you say less tolerant? You mean in your attitude?
Yeah, your attitude, simply because you're just not feeling yourself.
Yeah, that's true. That is actually true. So when I put people on certain regimes, if it's reversing diabetes, reversing blood pressure, I always say to them, look, in the first week, we've changed your diet. Your body wants to stay where it used to be. It wants to have the refined sugar, the high density carbohydrates, the high density fats. So it will react against what you're doing. And it often does it in the way you've said. It makes you a bit irritable. You can actually become a bit tired and lethargic. So when you're making that change, it takes about 2 or 3 days. It usually doesn't last longer than that, right? But the weight loss issue is a real one. And most people, for the majority of people, would say, well, that's a good thing because it helps us beat the battle of the bulge. But not everybody wants to lose weight. So if you don't want to lose weight, what you should be doing then is in your plant-based material, increasing the amount of material like beans in your diet or nuts in your diet, because they have high levels of protein per calories. In fact, beans and nuts have more protein per calorie than any type of meat. It doesn't matter whether it's filet steak or whatever. So the more of that you can take, the more you will be able to still generate the amount of muscle and get away from the weight loss. But yes, it is a natural side effect that you usually do lose weight. For most of us, that's not a problem. But if you do have a problem with it, increase the nuts, increase the beans.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer, as well, for posing the question. Mike, you're next.
Yeah. Good evening, Wes. Good evening, Dr. Chidi.
Good evening.
Lovely, beautiful presentation. We're learning so much. My question is, Cayenne pepper. I believe I've heard the saying that it's good for blood pressure and diabetes to the point that it can reverse it about half a tablespoon a day. Is that true or false?
Okay, that's a good one. So cayenne pepper. Yeah, this is another one of these spices, right? So this is, it just shows the power of spices. They are actually real. It is true. It can lower blood pressure. It does it very much like we talked about with the greens. It helps to vasodilate, open up the arteries. And as you open up arteries, you create more space so your blood pressure goes down. Absolutely. So you can almost use it like a drug. But your question was quite precise. You asked me, can it reverse high blood pressure? No, it can't reverse it. Because you can take the cayenne pepper, your blood pressure will go down, but when that effect wears off, the blood pressure goes back up. So you'd have to keep taking it. It's almost like a natural drug. And drugs don't cure you, drugs treat you. So this drug that you have has fewer side effects, absolutely wonderful. But if you want to get rid of blood pressure, you have to change the totality of your lifestyle. So for example, if somebody's going to McDonald's 3 times a day and they take cayenne pepper, okay, their blood pressure will come down, but the thing that's causing the blood pressure to go up is the diet and the lack of exercise. So we need to deal with the diet, lack of exercise. Cayenne pepper is a temporary measure, okay?
Is that okay?
Thank you very much. That was very informative. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Fantastic.
You, sir.
Okay, brilliant. Now, there's a question posed in the chat, which is quite interesting one from Jojo. I'm just trying to get that question back. Or Jojo, do you want to? I think I've got it. Okay, although, sorry, it was actually a direct question. But Jojo, do you mind if I share this question? Is Jojo around? No? Okay, I'm sure
Yeah, please.
Okay, right, great, thank you. Now, it's quite an interesting question. I think you're probably reading it as well. It says sterilization of process in microwave. So when we microwave our food, you know, or if we sterilize our food at say 100 degrees centigrade, there is obviously we are destroying the microorganisms at that specific temperature. So then if we are then cooking our food in the microwave, isn't there some destruction of the nutrients of the food as well? Were you being specific to the beans, or is it generalized in terms of what because you mentioned the beans and being sterilized, green beans, and there'll be some nutrients left. Is that specific to the beans, or are you saying generally with all types of food that can be sterilized? I think that's the question that Joe is trying to pose to us. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. So if I get that, it's referring to the microorganisms in the food. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. And that's why I did say briefly that it's actually good to have some raw food as well. Yeah, so you can have cooked food and micro food, but it's good to have some raw food. And I'll tell you why. You'll hear lots of people talking about prebiotics and probiotics. Okay, probiotics, you know, getting your healthy gut bacteria. That's wonderful. But there's one thing that is almost better than a probiotic, that's the prebiotic. Those bugs that are present on your greens and beans and whatever, when you ingest them, they then become those probiotics. So rather than taking lactobacillus or whatever, you can take natural greens, especially dark leafy greens that have the certain bugs on them that become prebiotics. But look, whether you microwave them or cook them, those bugs will be killed. So in terms of the actual nutritional value of greens or beans or whatever, hardly any of it is taken away by microwaving.
Okay, great.
We've got a storm down here, so I don't know if you can hear it, but
Wes.
Yeah.
I think you didn't ask the last question I asked. So if the microwave will not destroy the nutrients of the food, because if microorganisms are destroyed, are you saying that nutrients have a high resistance with heat? And if it's not destroyed, then how can nutrients be destroyed?
Yes, well, look, what we know is that by microwaving, the vast majority, I mean, I think less than 5% of the nutritional value of greens gets destroyed in microwaving. And you want to know, how can you destroy a nutrient? Yeah, I mean, you can burn it, you can denature it, but with microwaving, in fact, microwaving, when it comes to greens, that's a good point. When it comes to greens, microwaving has less destruction than cooking. Look that one up. So for greens, microwaving has less destruction of nutrients than actually boiling, right? So it's not going to cause really any destruction of your nutritional value.
Okay. Is that okay, Joe? Are you happy with that, Jojo?
I'm just wondering, because with the advent of microwave, how come Japan itself, number one, because they experienced a microwave effect when the Hiroshima was bombed.
Okay.
And actually, they're one of the promoters of not using microwave. So in terms of medicine as well, we know that Japan is very, very good in terms of that aspect, and
Yes.
they're more advanced. And how come they are actually discouraging people to use microwave?
Yeah, I think you've hit on a point there. So the evidence and the history of Nagasaki and Hiroshima makes them incredibly sensitive to things like microwave, but it's not quite the same thing. Okay, so what we're talking about is the nutritional value of food, and yes, there will be some loss. There will be some loss, but no more than 5 to 10%. So for most of us, it's not really a big issue to have your food microwaved in terms of the nutritional value of that food. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Right. But you're right about Japan being advanced in the medicine, way advanced.
Sure.
Can I
okay.
interject?
1 second. I'll put you down. I'll put you down. So give me a second, all right? And I'll get to you. There's a question here on the chat. Someone's concerned. There's a person that eats a lot of vegetables. Seems to be eating quite a bit of it, but she's concerned because it goes straight through her. So what can she do, and what is the reason for this as well?
Go and listen there, so you will learn something.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that seems to be an
family issue.
Okay. Yeah, so it goes straight through. Yeah, you know this issue. I mean, you've probably heard this yourself. Some of us have this issue when we start to eat something, and immediately we need to go to the bathroom, and it feels like I'm eating something and it's going right the way through me. Now, even though it feels like, it's not true. I mean, you've got about 23 to 30 feet of bowel for it to get there. It's not whizzing through your bowel. But what it is doing, once you eat, you are stimulating your gastrointestinal tract. And what then happens is that the end part of your gastrointestinal tract, the rectum and the colon, they then want to empty whatever their contents are. So, and my 5-year-old daughter here as well, jumping about. Okay, all right. So what they then want to do is to empty everything that's there. Now, I would say if that's happening regularly, I'm going to suggest, I'm rarely wrong about this, but maybe you can prove me wrong, but there may be a heightened level of stress in your life, because it just means that your bowels are very, very sensitive. It's almost on the way to irritable bowel syndrome. So that is rather than the food being the problem, it could be that there's a stress behind it that's causing the problem. Okay? Yes. Go to your move.
Okay. I hope that may have answered. The person who posed that question, because you gave it to me direct, you can sort of reply to me as well again if you feel that you would want to any sort of further question on that. Thanks for answering that, Dr. Chidi. Asta, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm rather surprised that the microwave has the grade decreased by 5%. How much would it be? How much would be lost with conventional cooking as opposed to microwave?
Okay, now I mean, you're now putting me on the spot here, but I know it's more. I don't know the exact amount, but I thought it was somewhere between 10 and 20%. Because yes, the heat denatures in boiling and cooking, but with microwaving, even though it's sort of an unnatural thing, because what you're doing is getting the molecules in the food to really vibrate very quickly. Apparently, the amount of nutrients, especially in fresh fruit and fresh vegetables, it doesn't denature that quickly at all. So yeah, microwaving about 5%, boiling, cooking, I believe is around about 10-20%.
So the best way to go is microwave when it comes to greens.
Yeah, or eat them as raw as you can. You know,
Wonderful.
that's perfect. And for those of you who have children, just like my child here, who do, and they go through that phase of not liking greens, let's all confess, it doesn't matter if they're Adventists grown up in they go through this phase of not liking greens. You just shove them all in a smoothie, they'll never know the difference.
Okay, fantastic. Right.
Right, there's another question. Can I interject?
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Right, we have actually touched the we haven't touched on the COVID side of things, but there is rumors going around that once you get the COVID injection, it will cause a situation where the autoimmune system takes over. Is there any truth in that?
Well, I mean, it's a good question, but I mean, all vaccines, what they do, your vaccines are there to prime your immune system. So they get your immune system ready for the next infection. And although they are designed to prime for a specific virus that's coming, it does it by raising the threshold, or what I should say is raising the alert level of your immune system. For some people, you may raise it slightly high so that, yeah, you get an autoimmune response. That does happen. That's a documented side effect of any kind of vaccine. This is not specific to COVID-19. You'll find it with everyone. So it's not really a new thing. The number of people that have it, we don't know. I mean, you can look on the government website about certain reactions that are happening already, but I don't think we have all the data as to how many people react like that, because also an autoimmune response can take quite a long time to generate, rather than the immune response. The autoimmune response can take a long time.
Fantastic, thanks. Asta, that's great. There's a question I had in my own mind, and I've just literally sort of, if it comes back to me, I'll ask you, but it left me because I was concentrating on something else just now. Does anyone else want to ask a question?
Yes, Wes, sorry to interject here. Dr. Chidi, what is best to take for bad circulation problem? You know, as you get up in, some people have it up in age and some people have it a bit quicker than up in age. What is the best remedy for bad circulation?
Yeah, so when we say bad circulation, what we're really saying is, am I getting enough blood to my extremities?
That's correct. That's correct.
To my fingers, to my toes, and whatever. So a bit like what I was saying earlier, then, we know that dark greens open up blood vessels. So an earlier question, I talked about cayenne pepper as well. So things like dark greens, make sure each day you're having your dark greens. If that's not going as rapidly as you want, you might want to try a little bit of cayenne pepper. That's fine, but the best way to maintain the opening of your arteries is to make sure that every single day you're having dark greens.
Thank you so much. Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, fantastic. I remembered my question as well. Now, when we take in quite a large proportion of vegetables, and I've heard it said that some folks lose energy, and I think that was mentioned as well by someone earlier on, that the energy that they used to have when they were eating meat, fish or chicken, they no longer have.
Yes.
I've read articles by another specialist into natural therapy who says that if that's the case, we need to take a fish oil, a very good supplement fish oil, because of the animal type of fatty acids would be more helpful in giving us that energy. And he was saying that the fatty acids in the plant is not as effective to give us that energy that we need. So what's your thought on this yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can look for that sort of evidence. Most of the evidence I've seen, and the common sense suggests to me that, well, I don't agree with it. I mean, I believe, and I can see, anybody who's ever watched that film Game Changers, where you're talking about people who are at the height of their physical attainment, they are the top NFL players, they're tennis players, they're just fantastic athletes, and they go all plant-based, they've not got any animal material. Somehow they improve their performance. So it seems to me that that is what we are actually designed for. We are actually designed for the plant-based material. Nonetheless, there is truth in the fact that when you make that conversion from what we would consider a calorie-rich diet with lots of fat, animal fat and animal sugar and all of that, and you change to a plant-based, there is a little bit of time, less than a week, where your body is struggling to change around, and that can cause you a little bit of fatigue. If you keep going through it, it will go. I remember when I did my big change many years ago, it happened to me, felt lousy, felt tired, but it just lasted a week and it went. And then you find that you have much more energy, much more energy than when I had before with all the animal fat. So just persevere, folks.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think that's been a very fruitful afternoon, and I've enjoyed.
No pun intended. No pun intended.
We really enjoyed the presentation this morning and this afternoon. I'm sure everyone else will agree with me that we have learned quite a bit from Dr. Chidi, and it's really just to go forward. So learning and then practicing. It's important to then put what we've learned into action, so we can actually see the benefit, and then we can tell others as well. This is what I did, and this is what I was told I did, and these are the results, the positive results, which when I put into action. Right. So, I don't know if Louise, you want to say anything to Dr. Chidi, because I'm going to ask Pastor to pray to close shortly. But Louise, did you want to say anything, or if anyone else just had a last question, a burning question?
Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother him.
Oh, Sandra, sorry. Yeah, I think I did see you. Beg your pardon, Sandra. Go ahead.
And thank you very much, Doctor. But I'm confused because I want to know about the chicken, the fish, and the meat. And another thing, what I want to know about, because my sister's not here, what's puzzling my head. I sit here and eat the chicken and the kebab. My sister went on strictly veggie. I'm still alive. I thought I was going to keel over and die. And she was strictly veggie and I was eating the kebab. And this is no joke, not now, but when I was sort of in my 30s, in my 20s, eating loads of kebabs. It wasn't one or two. And eating loads of chicken, I repeat myself. And she strictly went on veggie. And I thought I would be 6 feet under now with the meat. Okay. And she didn't eat hardly any chicken.
Yeah. That's a good question, Sandra. Thank you for posing that. Do you mind if I tell Dr. Chidi the condition that your sister had? Are you all right with that?
Yeah.
It was leukemia that her sister passed away with. A few years ago, and it's an important question you have posed there, and I'm glad you have posed that, so you can. I'm sure a lot of people will have the same kind of.
What's upsetting, you see, what puzzling me through the 20 years it's gone by, what's really is not to do with family. What's really killing me, I was the one that was abusing, eating the chicken, the kebabs, the takeaway, and she was eating strictly vegan. Viagra. She was eating. I was the one that was abusing my boy. She was drinking water. I was the one that was drinking shouldn't be saying that all the drinks what you shouldn't be drinking, like the rum. She drank water. I drank rum. I shouldn't be saying that. It's not just a little bit. It's going back a long time. You know what I mean? That's why it's puzzling me. And it's annoying. You was abusing your body. She was looking after her body.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Sandra. Okay, we'll get the doctor to answer your query there.
Well, Sandra, thank you for that point.
Can I ask one more question, please? Sorry to be so late.
I'm just in the middle of a question.
Yeah, just to get this one answered. And then we got Daffy as well. So we get, are you okay, Dr. Chidi, for just 10 more minutes and then we call it a day? Is that okay? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, well, thank you, Sandra, for that point. And it's a very important one. And it brings up what I think is a fundamental issue that sometimes we forget when we're talking about health. You can almost, be forgiven for thinking that, all right, if you eat all the right food, drink the right water, exercise, get your mind right, there is no way you can be hit by disease. And as a corollary to that, we then say, well, if somebody has got disease, it must be something terrible that they've done. I'm afraid that's nowhere near the truth. You can do everything right, but all that does is reduce your risk. You know, there's so much going on. There's so much stress in the world. There's all sorts of things that are impacting on us. So we can't possibly say that just because we have the right diet, there is no way that you're going to get sick. In the same way, yes, you're right. You, I, anyone can abuse themselves with all sorts of alcohol, cigarettes, whatever, and can still live a long life. It is possible, and I've seen that. You know, I've seen people who smoked 60 cigarettes a day for decades, and they're still living into their 80s and 90s. It's not written in stone that you must die early because of it. And likewise, I've seen people who've never smoked a cigarette in their life but got lung cancer. So we have to remember what we're talking about is probabilities. You are much less likely to have those diseases if you stick to this path, but you still can get them. And it goes back to what we were talking about this morning. It means that there is no reason then for anybody to judge somebody based on the fact that they've got an illness. Oh, they must have done something wrong. No, we're living in a fallen world. You know, this is not, we're not at heaven yet. So there are many things impacting us, but thank you for bringing that up. Look, yes, if you're going to ask me, and all the evidence suggests that a healthy plant-based diet is the best way to maintain your life, living and health. But it doesn't mean that you're immune to illness.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. I hope that answers the question, Sandra. Daffy has got your hand up. Elder Daffy, would like to pose a question.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much, Dr. Weston. Thank you very much, Dr. Chidi, for your time as well. Just a question, you know, if someone is suffering from migraines quite regularly, are there natural remedies that can be taken rather than having to take medications? Just want to know if we, yeah, thank you.
Very good point, very good point. So I'm mindful of a gentleman I was seeing last year who had 30 years of migraines. And I would say for 30 years, he had migraines, severe migraines 3 times a day. We worked on him, I think within 6 weeks, he was pretty much free. Maybe he had a mild migraine attack once every 2 weeks. Migraine usually is a function of stress. It's a way of stress being exhibited in our body. So yeah, there are drugs that can reduce the effects of it, but it doesn't get to the root cause. So rather than even talking about supplements, there are things you can take away from your diet that can reduce your risk, absolutely. But what you need is somebody to work with you in terms of stress and everything else. And the more you can do that, the better it will become, because most people I treat with migraines, they pretty much are free. They become free. But it's not just a case of supplementation, it's getting to the root cause of the problem.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answered the question, Elder Daffy.
Thank you, Dr. Chidi. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, there was someone before Brother Fortune comes in. There was someone who was trying to get in before Daffy. Is that Adrian? I'm not sure who it was again. Okay, probably have lost them. Okay, Brother Fortune, I'd like to pose a question.
Just a quick question. Okay. Someone who's suffering from stage 3 cancer, would a vegan diet be helpful?
Okay, and welcome from the Caribbean. I would say, no matter what stage you're in, a healthy plant-based diet will help. Now, what I'm not going to tell you is that, it will reverse it, or it will stop it in its tracks. But a healthy plant-based diet with all the things I was talking about, with the spices, with the greens, with the berries, with the water, that will definitely help. But there's no way I don't know anybody who can tell you, well, that alone will help you to reverse it. No, you continue with your treatment, but you are generating an environment in your body which is much more conducive to healing if you get onto a healthy plant-based diet.
The person I was referring to is not from the Caribbean, but I was just wondering if that made any difference.
No, I'm saying that it looks like you're coming from the Caribbean now. That's what I'm saying.
Your background.
My background, but
your background.
The person I'm asking about is not from the Caribbean.
Yeah. Okay, that joke was lost. Okay, that's fair enough. Not everybody gets my humor. That's fine. But it doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter where you come from. It's all the same. A healthy plant-based diet will improve the environment of your body and reduce your risk of cancer. It doesn't matter what stage. Yeah.
Brother Fortune, I hope that answered the question.
Yes, more or less.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is that it? Is that
this?
Okay, thanks everyone.
Is that Iris speaking?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes, Iris.
Okay, beg your pardon. Sorry. Go ahead.
Dr. Chidi, I'm so thankful for your presentation on health.
Yeah.
And I would like to ask about one health condition I have. It's restless foot syndrome. I was diagnosed with that about a year and a half now. And I had various type of medication, and now I'm on a medication called amitriptyline. And I don't think it's really working well for me. So do you know any other vegetable things that can help me?
Okay, so I mean, restless leg syndrome is a difficult one because it can be caused by so many things. I would suggest if you could probably contact me, it would be probably easier for me to deal with, because there's such a wide variety of things that could be causing it. And if you don't know the cause, you really don't know how to deal with the issue. So try and get in contact with me through the means that I've put forward, and we can have a proper conversation. Okay.
Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the question, Iris and Brother Fortune. Okay, I think that is it. I really appreciate everyone. I'm going to bring Louise in now, but I'm really sorry. Is there someone you want to?
No, it's me coughing.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I really appreciate the numbers that came back this afternoon to listen to Dr. Chidi. Really grateful for your presence. That's fantastic. And as I said, I will reiterate that everything that we have heard this morning and to this afternoon just help. I know you'll see the benefits when you do put these things into practice. And so this is your daughter. What's her daughter's name?
Chiamaka.
Hi, Chiamaka. Hi, Chiamaka. You'll be doing what your dad's doing soon.
Jesus
hasn't come by then. Okay.
And just to echo what everybody said, Dr. Chidi, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Your presentations have moved on from the years that I've seen you. Absolutely fantastic. Yes, you got better.
You're saying I wasn't very good in the beginning. That's not the polite way.
Okay, now you're very good, extremely good. And yes, I think we have to build on what you've reminded us of.
Yeah.
And the things that God has put in place. And I keep saying this, I will get a hold of you, Wes. We're going to have a health clinic once a month. I don't care what you're doing as a GP. People need help.
People need help. Can I have a last question?
Sorry?
It's Asta.
I was just wondering, can I have a last question?
No.
Right, okay, no worries.
Go on, Asta, go on. Don't make it into a War and Peace.
Next time, I suppose I can ask the question. This one is about blood pressure. I think it's a fact that Black people has got higher blood pressure than the white counterpart. Am I correct in that?
And, on average in the West, yes.
Blood pressure is an average, I believe, yes? What happens then when a person with a higher blood pressure who can live with it, but go to the doctor and the doctor deem that this blood pressure is rather high, then give him drugs now to reduce it down to the level that they see fit? Isn't this then detrimental to that individual?
Yeah, when you say they can live with it, what do you mean by that?
Well, as I say, there are people with high blood pressure,
Yes.
and it's not detrimental to their health. They can live happily forever. But if they go to a doctor, the doctor takes note of their blood pressure and say, it's got to be 130/80 then.
Yes.
And then give him drugs to reduce it to that level that the doctor sees fit.
Yeah.
Is it detrimental to that individual who has always had this high blood pressure?
Okay. So let me just tease out what you're saying, because yes, people are walking around with sky-high blood pressures, averagely high blood pressures, and you're right, they are living with it. But the problem is, we are all human beings. We're all pretty much the same inside. No matter what people want to tell us, we're all pretty much the same. And the pressure of our system should only be at a certain maximum. Otherwise, it's a bit like a balloon. If you're putting it under too much pressure, of course, you can go for years like it, but you run the risk of it popping at one stage. And it pops, it has a greater risk of popping the greater the pressure you have. Now, you may, as you say, live a long life with high blood pressure, but honestly, I wouldn't want to run that risk, because one stroke changes your life completely, right? So your doctor is right to want to bring that blood pressure down. My only disagreement with the doctors is that they say, well, we'll put you on this medication for the rest of your life, which artificially brings your blood pressure down. When what they should be doing is saying, okay, let's bring your blood pressure down with the medication, and then give you the lifestyle tools to bring it down naturally. Then we can take the medication away. That is what I do with people, but that's what I would advise any doctor to do. But thank you, it was a good question.
Amen.
Wonderful, thank you so much for that advice.
Okay.
Okay, well, back to me then.
Yeah.
Again, thank you very much. And it's been an absolute blessing. And we're all taking, if not one thing, many things away from your
Praise the Lord. Well,
God is
well,
good.
thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be up there.
I had to beat many people off, so you're very honoured.
Well, I know that.
But yes, it's been a blessing, a treasure, and God to take care of you. He will take care of you. He has taken care of you, and he needs to even more, because you have to come back.
Okay, I
didn't say
definitely
that.
will.
I did.
Thank you.
Okay. Have we got somebody to? Would you like to pray, Dr. Chidi?
Oh, okay. Because I did ask Pastor both.
I can't see him.
Let Pastor pray.
Is he there? I couldn't see him.
Oh, is he gone? He's probably gone.
Pastor Bernie, are you there? Show thyself. I didn't see him.
Okay.
No, he's not there. Dr. Chidi, could you please have the...
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Father in heaven, we're so grateful to you for giving us this time together. Even though we're far apart, we are still connected, and we're thankful for that. Lord, there are so many of us suffering with all sorts of issues, be they issues of our mind, our body, or even our spirit. We, your children, we come before you asking for the healing of us as individuals, as families, as churches, as communities, and as this nation and the world. You see what's going on. Whilst we're seeing it, Lord, may you give us the power to be part of that change agent for the world. May we be part of the light that can help people out of darkness, physical, emotional, and spiritual. We want to ask you to continue to bless the community of believers in Luton, where they continue to be that light in that part of the world and direct people to you. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.